You'd think you'd notice it if a woman wanted you. You imagine it would be obvious flushed cheeks, sultry glances, lips parted like an invitation. But lust, real lust, doesn't look the way you were taught to expect. It doesn't announce itself. It infiltrates. It signals in nuance, not noise. And most men walk blind into these signals because they're not trained to see them. You are conditioned to believe that desire is explicit, performative, theatrical, but female arousalists, especially when it's strategic, is camouflaged behind subtleties so refined that only the self-aware can perceive them. Carl Jung would call this the realm of the unconscious. Shadow-aware instinct hides behind social masks. And in this space, women communicate desire not by revealing it, but by cloaking it in symbolic gestures that bypass your rational filter. A fleeting change in breath, the way her eyes hold you longer than necessary. Not long enough to confirm, but just long enough to destabilize. Lust, for women, is often about maintaining plausible deniability while broadcasting intense inner heat. Why? Because power is preserved through ambiguity. Long as you're unsure, she retacked Penhauer understood this. The will to life expresses itself through manipulation of illusion. What you think is affection may be a carefully played projection. She doesn't need to confess. She only needs to provoke your need for confirmation. That's the trap. You chase certainty while she feeds you mystery. You look for signs she likes you instead of recognizing how your desire is being. Pullmen who miss these signals aren't stupid. They're untrained. They're looking for fire in the sky, not the match lit in the corner of the room. You've been conditioned to ignore the language of tension, micro-expression, limbic shift. But this is the battlefield where desire unfolds because lust isn't loud. It's rescanning for the wrong signs. You've been trained by media to chase theatrical gestures, the lip bite, the hair flip, the exaggerated lean in. But those are decoys. The real signals happen in the stillness between movements. The moment she freezes mid-gesture when your presence enters her space. The micropause before she responds. The breath she holds without knowing why. Stillness, not motion, is the biological reveal. When a woman is truly aroused or intrigued, her nervous system enters a predator-prey paradox. She doesn't necessarily want to move. She wants to register, to track. And part of her deep, instinctual, ancestral fears her own reaction. That stillness is her nervous system's confession. A confession her words will never make. You think you're reading confidence in her body, but often you're reading restraint. That slight tension in her neck isn't indifference, it's control. Control over the heat rising inside her. The eyes that blink a little too slowly aren't sleepy, they're seducing. Calibrating the emotional voltage of your presence, Jung would tell you that everything repressed returns in symbol, and the symbols of lust are subtle, widened pupils. In dim light, a frozen shoulder that doesn't flee, a smile that breaks only after a delay. These aren't acts, they're instinctual leaks. Biological confessions too fast for conscious filtering, but you miss them because you're looking for proof, not pattern. You seek certainty when the real cues are probabilistic. Her stillness doesn't guarantee she wants you. It means she's noticing you viscerally, possibly involuntarily. And that's the ground where erotic tension begins, not where it ends. What you miss in these moments is this. Nature designed female desire to hide in plain sight. Because overt arousal once meant danger, reputation, exile, risk. So desire evolved to speak in coded silences. And unless you've learned to read those codes, you walk right past them, thinking nothing happened. When in fact, everything just shifted. Stillness is the spark before the burn. The moment the hunt begins, and you didn't even know you. Where prey you assume body language is accidental, but her body is a theater and you're on stage whether you know it or not. When a woman is drawn to you, even subtly, she arranges herself to include you in her physical world. The way she crosses her legs toward you. How her feet point in your direction, even when her words don't. These aren't coincidences. They're unconscious staging spatial invitations into her frame of attention. You've learned to read words, but her desire doesn't speak in words, it speaks in geometry. Distance, angle, orientation. She adjusts her shoulder just slightly toward you. She leans in with her ribcage even as her head turns away. These are not mistakes. These are gravitational shifts. Her body repositions to capture you in her orbit, often without her even knowing she's doing it. Why? Because biology favors precision. Evolution doesn't waste movement. Every subtle shift is a calibration of energy. Are you responsive? Are you dominant? Are you safe, but not too safe? Jung might call it the instinctual pull of the anima, the internal feminine principle in man responding to its projected reflection in the outer woman. You don't just see her, you feel her pull you, and your anima responds like a tuning fork. Here's the brutal truth. You miss it because your gaze is too loud. You look for movement when you should be sensing arrangement. A woman will often test your awareness before she tests your confidence. She'll offer a window her posture, her angles, your silent choreography, and wait to see if you recognize the invitation. But if you miss the frame, you miss the game. A woman casting you into her body's frame is not overt flirtation. It's strategic exposure. It's a quiet gamble. Can he read tension without noise? Can he notice proximity without desperation? Because the man who sees the frame, who feels the shift before it's declared, is the one who isn't being seduced. He's being chosen. She tells you about the time she felt ugly, or how she overthinks everything, or how sometimes she doesn't feel lovable, and you think, oh, now she trusts me. But here's the question. Why now? Why this confession? In this moment? Because vulnerability, when it appears suddenly and without context, isn't always honest, it's often strategy. You've been taught that when a woman opens up emotionally, it means safety, intimacy, truth. But what if that crack in the armor isn't weakness, but a hook? Schopenhauer would say that Wilfa, engine of life, manifests in manipulation cloaked as meaning. Her story about the friend who betrayed her, that's not random. It's carefully timed to trigger your protector instinct. She's not just opening up, she's enrolling you. She's pulling you into a psychic contract. If I show you my scars, you'll feel compelled to stay. You don't realize you've been conscripted. You just feel the surge of empathy. And in that moment, your critical mind shuts down. You don't ask if this disclosure is earned. You don't notice how it's calibrated to your emotional circuitry. You only feel needed. That is the oldest seduction in human history. These flashes of vulnerability are invitations, but not to love. To power exchange, because the moment you position yourself as the emotional rescuer, you hand her the frame. She's no longer trying to gain your attention. You are now trying to prove your adequacy as her anchor. You become the stability too, her storm. And in that inversion, she controls the weather. Jung knew this well. What we experience as connection is often projection. You project significance onto her words. You assume emotional exposure equals emotional compatibility. But what if it's not about compatibility? What if it's about control? When a woman drops a vulnerable moment early, unpredictably, and with heightened emotion, it's often a move, a signal flare designed not to reveal her inner world, but to colonize yours. Because when she shows you the wound, she's not asking for healing. She's checking to see if you'll bleed for her. You think eye contact is a sign of connection? Can be. But in a woman trained, consciously or not, the evolutionary language of power, eye contact becomes something else, a lever. When she holds your gaze just a second too long, she's not necessarily being vulnerable. She's testing voltage. She's watching how you respond to intensity, how you break, how you hold, how you flinch. Because your eyes will betray your depth, your need, your hunger. And hers will signal just enough warmth to invite, and chill just enough to confuse. That tension is not accidental, it's designed. Jung would call this the anima projection cycle. When a man sees in a woman, it's the image of his own unintegrated feminine. She holds your gaze, and you don't just feel attraction, you feel. Meaning, you feel recognition. She becomes a mirror for the part of you you've never claimed. And in that moment, your power exits your chest and enters her eyes. And then she looks away. You're left suspended, open, activated. This isn't cruelty, it's leverage. Because if a woman can hold your gaze long enough to stir your unconscious, but not long enough to satisfy it, she implants herself, becomes a puzzle you need to solve. A glitch in your mind's certainty. And that uncertainty becomes desire. Schopenhauer knew this. What we call romantic is often just the will's attempt to secure genetic survival through emotional fixation. The prolonged gaze isn't about soul connection, it's a calibration device. It's her checking. Will this man chase? Will he unravel? Will he submit? And most do. They mistake intensity for intimacy. They mistake prolonged visual contact for shared feeling. But in truth, she may not be feeling much at all. She's watching you feel. This isn't to paint her as a villain, it's to awaken you as a sovereign. Case. If your self-worth dissolves under the weight of a stare, then you were never grounded to begin with. Her gaze is not a window, it's a scalpel. And she's waiting to see if you'll bleed or build. You're listening to her words. But it's not the content that penetrates, it's the cadence, the tone, the musical shift in her voice. You think she's just being soft, maybe a little shy. But what's really happening is biological theater. Her voice lowers, it slows, it elongates. Before you know it, you're not thinking, you're responding. Physically, primally. Men often forget that. Communication isn't merely semantic, it's somatic. A woman who understands this, even unconsciously, doesn't need to be overtly seductive. She just needs to drop her pitch. Because a lower, slower tone bypasses your prefrontal cortex and slips directly into the limbic system. The part of you that doesn't reason. The part that wants. Schopenhauer would call this a manipulation of the will using sound to bend perception, to bypass consent through resonance. Jung would say you've been pulled into a projection field. You think her voice is soft because she's inviting connection. But what if that softness is a test? Spell? This is not poetry. This is physiology. Studies have shown that women instinctively alter their voice pitch in the presence of a man they find attractive. And more than that, when they want to create intrigue or tension, they don't raise their voice. They lower it. It's not to soothe you, to hook you. And when her voice changes mid-sentence, when she goes from playful to slow, light to immature, body reacts before your mind understands. You lean in, you focus harder, you fall in. Not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. That drop in pitch is a descent into your unconscious. It disarms you. It makes you mistake sensual tone for emotional openness. And once again, you project. You think she's into me. But in truth, she's into her effect on you. And here's the trap. You don't even realize your nervous system has been rewired. Her voice wasn't just sound, it was strategy. A low-frequency Trojan horse, and you welcomed it. She laughs like you, tilts her head when you do, picks up your slang, mirrors your gestures, breathes in sync. And you think, wow, we're so in tune. But you're not in tune. You're being played by evolution, not necessarily by malice. Mirroring is one of the most ancient, powerful tools in human interaction. It creates unconscious rapport, safety, familiarity. It's what therapists use to build trust. What artists use to build access. And what women, especially those with social intelligence, do almost reflexively when they want to bypass your guard. You assume it's accidental, that she's just naturally aligned with you. But biology has wired women to mirror when interested. Why? Because when someone mirrors you, you feel seen, reflected, accepted. You begin to open. And in that opening, projection floods in. Jung warned about this. We do not see others. We see through them, onto them. We cast our anima onto the canvas of her face, her tone, her mood. And if she mirrors it well, we call it love. But what? Your feeling may not be love. It's recognition of yourself. She becomes your echo. And that echo becomes an addiction. Schopenhauer would say, this is the will tricking you again. Again. Self-preservation as compatibility. You think, she's just like you. You think you've found a rare emotional twin, but what you found is a mirror and mirrors don't have depth. They only reflect what you bring. Now ask, does she really share your rhythm? Or is she adapting to you to stimulate attraction without committing to it? Because when she mirrors your body language, your emotional tone, your verbal style, she's not bonding, she's building resonance. And resonance makes you vulnerable. But you feel echoed, your critical mind surrenders. You're no longer analyzing, you're investing. Here's the final twist. Many women mirror without even knowing. It's not always a scheme, it's instinct. But instinct doesn't care about your clarity, it only wants control. So the next time she leans in and speaks in your cadence, remember, she may not be matching you, she may be casting you. She mocks your shirt, teases your vocabulary, imitates your laugh. You chuckle, thinking she's just flirting, lighthearted, playful fun. But if you step back and listen without needing it to feel good, you'll notice something else, a power shift, frame test, a challenge. This isn't random teasing. It's hierarchy play designed to see where you place yourself. In the world and in her mind, you imagine desire is born of kindness, that she'll respect you more the more agreeable you are. But Schopenhauer knew better. He saw that the will doesn't seek comfort, it seeks strength. And strength in courtship is never handed to you. It's extracted. It's through friction. When she mocks you lightly, she's not being mean, she's probing. Does your sense of self hold under pressure? Can you remain composed when your ego is nudged? Do you laugh it off? Shrink? Lash out? Your reaction tells her everything. Jung understood the archetype behind this. It's the erotic trickster. The playful feminine who wields chaos not to harm, but to test the soul's structure. The tease isn't random. It's mythological, a miniature initiation. And if you fail, if you collapse into validation seeking, if you apologize for existing, if you explain yourself, you've lost the polarity. The tension dies. She doesn't want a punching bag nor a doormat. She wants to know if your confidence is embodied, or just borrowed. Her tease isn't to wound, it's to reveal. And most men expose themselves instantly. They over-defend, or they mirror her tone, hoping to win favor. But favor isn't given through submission. It's earned through centered presence. This isn't about being alpha. It's about being unmoved, not numb, not arrogant, just sovereign. When she throws the hook, will you flail, or will you smile knowingly, remain rooted, and throw it back with conscious mischief? Because here's the truth she'll never say. Erotic polarity thrives on hierarchy games, but only when both players know it's a game. And the man who knows he's being tested isn't the one who panics. He's the one who's already passed. A brush of her fingers as she walks by. A brief touch on your forearm during conversation. Her knee grazing yours under the table. You tell yourself it's nothing. It didn't linger. It didn't escalate. It wasn't intentional, but your nervous system disagrees. That touch, that fraction of a second contact, is an insertion. A psychological claim. It bypasses the intellectual firewall and goes straight to the reptilian brain. And what's terrifying is, it works. Begin to remember her body before you remember her words. That's not affection, it's dominion. Men are taught to ignore these touches, to write them off as friendly, accidental, meaningless. In evolutionary psychology, there's no meaningless touch. Every contact is either submission, dominance, or testing. And a woman who touches you without justification is doing something far more powerful than flirting. She's shifting your neurochemistry because touch releases oxytocin attachment hormones. Dopamine reward anticipation. Cortisol if uncertainty remains. These chemicals don't wait for you to understand. They simply bind. That small touch becomes a seed. You begin to think about her more. Feel her absence when she's not there. Imagine more touches that haven't yet happened. Jung would say this is the activation of an archetypal bond, where your anima locks onto the physical symbol of its projection. She touched you, and now your unconscious believes it's claimed. Owned. Integrated. Schopenhauer would call it biological puppetry. The will to propagate manipulating sensation to enslave consciousness. You smile through it because you think you're progressing. but you're not progressing. You're submitting. Here's the deeper truth. She may not even be fully aware of the effect she's having. That doesn't change the effect, because instinct precedes intention. And female instinct is wired to touch with purpose, and always. Sexually, but always strategically, every accidental. Touch asks a silent question. How does he respond to intimacy without certainty? And most men answer with hunger, with leaning in, with losing presence, with preemptive surrender. But the man who recognizes these touches for what they are, power move cloaked as connection, is the man who can respond without reaction, feel without falling. Because sometimes the most dominating gesture is the gentlest one. She texts you, then disappears. She stares at you for a moment too long, then looks through you like a stranger. She confesses something intimate, then retreats into cold silence. And you're left circling the same question. What just happened? This isn't randomness. This is control. Scarcity breeds obsession. Intermittent reward creates addiction. Whether she knows it or not, she's wielding this principle with surgical precision. You assume her distance is fear. Her silence is hesitation. Her inconsistency is confusion. But what if it's none of those? What if it's strategy? What if she leaves you wanting? Because that's where your power leaks. Jung taught that. Projection thrives in absence. The less you know, the more you imagine. And the more you imagine, the more you surrender to your unconscious fantasies. She doesn't need to show up fully. She just needs to appear, disappear, then appear again long enough to keep your psyche spinning. Schopenhauer would see this as the will's greatest trick, to create fixation through frustration. You want what is withheld? You'll chase what disappears. You burn for what gives you just enough warmth to keep hoping. This is not evil, this is biology. A woman's ability to entrance a man lies not in how much she offers, but in how precisely she withholds. The flirty message left unread. The sudden drop in energy after days of emotional intensity. The shift from warm to cold without explanation. These are not malfunctions. They're mechanisms. Mechanisms that activate your inner chaos, your need for resolution, your hunger for certainty, and you confuse this inner turmoil for love. You start trying harder, explaining yourself, playing detective, making excuses for her absence. But in doing so, you invert the polarity. You give her the frame. You chase what once was uncertain and now has become unattainable. But here's the truth. The woman who leaves you wanting isn't always trying to hurt you. She's trying to see if you'll fracture or forge. Because the one thing more attractive than desire is sovereignty. The man who doesn't need her presence to remain whole, who doesn't confuse silence with loss, who doesn't beg the game to continue, he doesn't chase the disappearing act. He ends the performance. Now you see the architecture beneath the attraction, the hidden levers, the unconscious patterns, the ancient games disguised as romance. These signs of lust aren't accidents. They're encrypted messages passed down through biology, psychology, and myth. Most men remain blind to them, seduced not just by women, but by their own projections, illusions, and unclaimed anima. But you're not most men. You're not here to remain reactive. You're here to indie-weighty, to extract your self-worth from the feminine gaze, to decode desire without losing sovereignty, to hold presence when the world tempts you to chase shadows. This awareness is your weapon, your mirror, your awakening, because the more you see the patterns, the less power they have over you. You stop chasing what disappears. You stop bleeding for every whisper of validation. And instead, you begin to choose, not from need, but from vision. The game doesn't end, but you stop playing it unconsciously. You become the author, the actor. If this opened your eyes, if you saw yourself in these patterns, and you're done being played by what you don't understand, then share this video. Like it, comment. Speak the truth that most won't, because awareness spreads through fire. It's not silence. And right now, men need fire, not fantasy, not hope. Clarity, you've been warned. You've been shown. Now choose. sleepwalk through her. Signals are wake up and see the frame, because once you see it, you never unsee it.